pond, so to speak, to be here to testify at this hearing. We appreciate it very much. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Poe, Ranking Member Keating and Member Frankel for inviting me to travel across the pond and speak on this very important subject. My colleague, my Executive Director, Quilliam US, would have been here, but he's in Nigeria right now, training male and female members of civil society on critical thinking to tackle terrorism. Quilliam is an organisation that operates in 3 countries, the UK, US and Canada, and it's an organisation that was set up by former extremists to challenge Islamist terrorism and Islamist ideology. And I think it's very important that we use the correct terminology and we use Islamism and differentiate between Islam, because just as there's a difference between the word social and socialism, there is a difference between Islam, which is a religion that's practiced by Muslims around the world in many different ways. Islamism is a distinct political ideology when merged with certain Salafi Wahhabi theology, is one interpretation and is part of a civil war that's going on within Islam right now. Chairman Poe, you're absolutely right that women are ideally placed to be primary and secondary intervention providers because of their proximity, their prestige and their passion. They are much more effective than any government initiatives direct or any governments can be, and quite often more effective than men when it comes to providing these interventions for young male and female members of their families. In order to understand the best way to actually look at projects to prevent terrorism, we need to look at the radicalization process, and there are 4 key aspects to it. The first one, there has to be a grievance, whether it's genuine, partial or perceived. The second one, there has to be a charismatic recruiter or recruiters that will recruit people who have these grievances. The third thing is there has to be an identity crisis. People have to be told that the only way they're going to find solutions is if they join a particular Islamist gang. And the fourth one is the ideology of Islamism itself that actually provides solutions for some of these people. In case of women and our groundbreaking research, which I co-authored, called Caliphates, Women and the Appeal of Islamic State, the 4 main solutions for women were the following. The first one, the promise of empowerment. The second one, the promise of deliverance. The third one, the promise of participation. And the fourth one, the promise of piety. Once we understand these processes, we can start looking at projects and ways of actually preventing terrorism. And I just want to touch very briefly on 4 projects that we've worked on, that we've run or worked on, and you can read more about them in the written testimony. The first one is a current project in Nigeria, which is around critical thinking, which my Executive Director, Mohammed Fraser Rahim, is delivering right now. It's on critical thinking. The second one is AMATE, which is the American Muslims Against Terrorism and Extremism. We run that with our partners in the US, Masjid Muhammad, and also with Green Street Communications. And in fact, the project is led by an African-American Muslim woman, Jamila Fraser. And since its launch in January the 8th of this year, we've reached 705,000 people, out of which 86,000 people have been women. And I can go into the demographics a little bit more. The third one is the rehabilitation of former terrorists within the UK. There have been a number of people that have been released here in the US over the last 12 months, and we've worked with some of them, male and female, and there'll be some news and some announcements that we'll have where we've de-radicalized, used models that we've used in other countries to de-radicalize individuals here in the US. And by the way, there are just under 20 further people that will be for convicted terrorists in the US that will be released within the next 12 months. The fourth one is FATE, which is Families Against Terrorism and Extremism. And that's one of our flagship programs where we've operated in 22 countries with 115 organizations. 10,000 providers of services have been the beneficiary of training. We've upskilled, we've trained people in North Africa and in Central Europe as well. And again, we've helped them build messages and really used women and families to actually become this bulwark against terrorism. There are about 12 recommendations in my testimony, but the gist really of the recommendations are around the following. At this moment in time, we are actually playing whack-a-mole. We are actually focusing on a strategy that is about terrorism prevention. And once we actually contain one global jihadist terrorist threat, there's a new one that pops up. But ISIS and Al-Qaeda didn't breed extremism. Extremism bred them. In order to actually become more effective, we have to recognize that there is a global jihadist insurgency, and we also need an effective counter-extremism strategy, which actually works with women, and empowers civil society as a whole to take on this challenge and counter the narratives that would radicalize our youngsters. Thank you.